George Washington Bridge is painted by workers balancing it.
Black atmosphered foundry should be an image whose time has passed.
To and fro and to, cross for me, cross for you.
In the 1960s, danger was an everyday reality on the job. Workers faced extreme risks and harsh conditions, turning ordinary roles into deadly undertakings. From perilous heights to toxic environments, these jobs were no joke. Are you ready to discover the most dangerous roles of that era? Join us as we explore 20 dangerous jobs in the 1960s that no longer exist today. Radium dial painters, mostly young women in the early 20th century, painted watch dials with radium, a radioactive substance that glowed in the dark. Starting during World War I, the painters were unaware of the dangers and frequently used their lips to sharpen brushes, ingesting radium daily.
My first day at work, well, I thought I didn't like it. Because after, they learn you to put the thing in your mouth, that's the first thing they taught you.
They were called ghost girls because the radium dust caused their clothes and skin to glow. Radium was initially thought to be safe, maybe even beneficial. However, by the 1920s, many workers began suffering from severe radiation poisoning, leading to agonizing illnesses and deaths. Companies initially denied the link, but lawsuits eventually exposed the truth, resulting in significant workplace safety reforms. The Radium Girls case was pivotal in establishing regulations for radioactive materials. It led to the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, which helped improve working conditions and marked the end of this dangerous occupation. In the 1960s, dynamite blasters' jobs were crucial and dangerous. These workers used dynamite to clear paths for major construction projects such as roads, tunnels, and mining operations.
Precision and excruciating attention to detail are vital job requirement, but the end result is always exciting.
Armed with only basic safety gear, they set charges and manually triggered explosions to break through solid rock or other tough materials. The work was highly dangerous due to the constant risk of premature detonations, misfires, or handling errors. This job was in high demand at the peak of infrastructure development, but came at the cost of many lives. As controlled demolition technology advanced, safer methods like precision blasting, remote detonation systems, and improved explosives became the norm. By the late 20th century, the role of a dynamite blaster began to fade, replaced by automated machinery and stricter safety protocols. Today, the job is largely obsolete, a relic of a time when human hands and high risks powered progress. Bridge painting was once among the most hazardous construction jobs. Workers scaled towering structures with minimal safety gear, balancing on shaky scaffolding high above rivers and roads. Falls were a constant threat, and toxic lead-based paints added further risks.
Every day, these guys weave in and out of steel mazes, rigging, climbing, scraping, and painting the rusted steel, all while hundreds of feet.
Painters were exposed to harmful fumes and dust from sanding and scraping old paint, often without adequate ventilation or protective equipment. The job peaked during the mid-20th century infrastructure boom, when many of America's iconic bridges required maintenance. By the late 80s, awareness of health hazards and stricter safety regulations led to the profession's decline. Lead-based paints were banned, and advances in automation allowed machines to take over much of the work. Modern safety standards reduced the need for manual bridge painters, leaving this once dangerous job as a relic of a time before technology and safety reshaped hazardous occupations. Next, a job descending deep into the earth where hidden dangers lurked. Uranium mining was a booming yet dangerous industry in the 1950s and 60s as demand for nuclear energy and weaponry skyrocketed during the Cold War.
I'm 200 meters below the surface in the Schwarzwälder uranium mine near Denver in Colorado.
Uranium miners work deep underground, extracting the radioactive material, often unaware of the deadly risks. The primary danger came from protracted exposure to radon gas, which releases alpha-emitting radioactive decay products. These particles were inhaled by miners, leading to severe long-term health effects, particularly lung cancer. The job was popular after World War II, peaking in the 1960s. However, by the late 70s, awareness of the health risks and improved safety regulations caused a decline in uranium mining. Many mines were closed, and the jobs started fading out as alternative energy sources became more viable. Stricter rules on radiation exposure and rising environmental concerns made this job less common. In the bustling factories of the 1970s, the role of a factory assembly line inspector was as vital as it was dangerous. These inspectors worked amidst the relentless hum of heavy machinery, meticulously checking each product for flaws as it sped by.
If one piece of candy gets past you and into the packing room unwrapped, you're fired.
Imagine them navigating a maze of gears and belts, their keen eyes scanning for imperfections in an environment where a misstep could lead to injury. During this era of rapid industrial expansion, these inspectors were the unsung heroes of quality control. They were on the front lines, ensuring every item met rigorous standards. However, by the late 1980s, the landscape began to change. Automation and robotics started revolutionizing manufacturing, taking over the inspector's role. Machines proved to be faster and more precise, rendering the manual inspection process obsolete and making the once dangerous job obsolete. Our journey through time now leads us to the deep underground. Back in the day, the life of an underground coal miner was a risky dance with danger. Deep below the Earth's surface, miners struggled with the constant threat of cave-ins, explosive gases, and clouds of coal dust that could suffocate or maim. The conditions were harsh, scorching temperatures, oppressive humidity, and the ever-present risk of rockfalls. Miners used rudimentary equipment and faced daily hazards that led to frequent accidents and health issues. This dangerous job peaked during the 1960s when coal was the backbone of industrial expansion. However, as the years passed, the introduction of advanced mining technologies and stricter safety regulations started to transform the industry. By the 1980s, modern safety standards and better equipment began phasing out old ways, significantly reducing traditional underground coal mining. Today, the underground miner's once common and dangerous role has largely faded into history, replaced by safer, more efficient practices. The next job on our list was as crucial as it was deadly. In the 1960s, being a telephone lineman was not for the faint of heart.
They had some competitions between the groups to try to see how far they could go.
These brave souls scaled towering poles, manually connecting and repairing telephone lines, often while juggling live wires. The job was incredibly critical, with an alarming statistic showing that 42 out of every 100,000 linemen faced fatal accidents each year. The combination of high voltage, dizzying heights, and unpredictable weather made their work a daily gamble. The job was crucial during its heyday as it kept communication lines running, but it was expensive. Linemen had to contend with harsh conditions and the constant threat of electrical shocks. Over time, technological advancements and safety protocols began to change the game. Automation and new safety measures started to reduce the risk significantly, making the job safer. By the late 20th century, many of the trade's dangerous aspects had been mitigated, leading to the decline of the traditional lineman role. Today, linemen benefit from safer practices and modern technology, making their work far less hazardous than in the past. Being a lumberjack was one of the most dangerous jobs in America. Manual logging required loggers to use axes and handsaws to fell massive trees, often in dense forest with limited visibility. Their tools were rudimentary, and oxen dragged trees out or floated down rivers. The job was dangerous because of falling branches, unpredictable weather, uneven terrain, and the sheer size of the trees. Manual logging was popular during the early 20th century when it was essential for America's industrial growth. However, technological advancements began to shift the industry by the 1960s. Chainsaws and mechanized harvesters replaced manual tools, making logging safer and more efficient and reducing the need for manual loggers. As machinery took over, the job's inherent risks diminished, as did the need for traditional loggers. Modern logging involves complex equipment like feller bunchers and skidders, and environmental concerns have led to more sustainable practices. The old manual logging methods, once a vital part of America's forestry, have largely vanished. The next job on the list was rare and exceptionally deadly. Starting in the 1920s, Boilermakers performed a job fraught with hidden dangers due to the widespread use of asbestos.
Boilermaker term is thrown around a lot, but no one really actually knows what it is. You know, it's funny, I actually lived with Purdue Pete. He had absolutely no clue what a Boilermaker actually was.
These skilled workers assembled and maintained boilers, crucial for industries requiring high pressure and high temperature steam. Asbestos was widely used to enhance boiler durability and insulation. Unfortunately, the dust from asbestos was extremely deadly when inhaled, leading to severe lung diseases and cancer. During this era, safety standards were minimal, and workers were frequently exposed to airborne asbestos fibers from boiler maintenance, manufacturing processes, and the materials used in boiler rooms. Asbestos was commonly employed in repairing cracks, insulating boilers, and constructing various boiler components. By the 1980s, growing awareness of asbestos-related health risks led to stricter regulations and the eventual decline of asbestos use. Companies had long known about these dangers, but concealed them to protect profits. Advances in safety standards and automated systems have since rendered the Boilermaker's role obsolete in its pre-modern form, replacing it with safer practices and materials. In the 1960s, iron workers on skyscraper construction sites were among the most dangerous jobs in America. Iron workers assembled the structural steel frameworks, forming the towering building skeletons. Working high above the ground without safety harnesses, they navigated narrow beams and steel girders, often facing harrowing conditions. Falls from these heights were frequent and fatal, with many workers risking their lives daily. Beside falls, they contended with struck-by injuries from falling tools and materials, musculoskeletal damage from heavy lifting, and electrocution hazards. Ironworks were at their peak during the skyscraper boom, particularly in cities like New York, where iconic structures like the Empire State Building were being erected. However, by the late 1970s, the job's danger began to diminish as safety regulations and modern equipment were introduced. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration established stricter safety standards, and advancements in equipment such as safety harnesses and improved scaffolding greatly reduced the risk. As a result, the critical nature of ironworking in skyscraper construction significantly lessened, leading to a decline in the job's danger and consequently its dramatic decrease in the public consciousness. Industrial divers once held one of the most dangerous jobs. They would dive into deep waters to inspect and repair underwater structures like bridges, oil rigs, and ships. Their work was often performed in hazardous conditions without the sophisticated safety suits we have today. Operating with basic diving gear, these divers faced extreme pressure, cold temperatures, and murky visibility. Their role was critical as industries expanded rapidly and needed constant maintenance of submerged assets. The thrill of exploration and the urgency of repairs made their work both vital and dangerous. However, as technology advanced, the need for human divers began to wane. The development of remote-controlled underwater robots and improved safety equipment meant that machines could now perform many tasks more efficiently and safely. By the latter part of the 20th century, the job of an industrial diver had largely faded, replaced by technological innovations that changed the landscape of underwater work. Have you ever wondered about the risks involved in making leather? Let's find out. Working as a tannery worker was a dangerous job. It was critical to turn raw hides into leather for everything from shoes to furniture.
A lot of people were afraid of that machine because there was a lot of people walking around with hands like this, fingers gone.
Tanners dealt with toxic chemicals like chromium salts, sulfuric acid, and dyes, essential for treating and coloring the leather. This exposure led to severe health issues, including dermatitis, asthma, and chronic bronchitis. Over time, the industry faced increasing scrutiny due to environmental and health concerns. Automation started to replace manual labor, and stricter regulations aimed at reducing chemical waste and improving worker safety emerged. As a result, the hazardous nature of the job, combined with technological advancements and new environmental laws, has all but phased out this once critical profession. Hand harvesting was once grueling and dangerous. Workers toiled under the blazing sun to gather crops by hand. This demanding job involved crouching or bending for hours, with every muscle aching as they harvested fruits and vegetables. The true danger, however, lies in their exposure to toxic pesticides like DDT, commonly used to fend off pests but carrying significant health risks. The role of a hand harvester was essential to agriculture, as it ensured the timely collection of produce before spoilage. Despite its importance, the job was fraught with hazards from physical strain to pesticide poisoning. As technology advanced, the clamor for manual harvesters began to wane. The introduction of mechanized equipment, such as automated harvesters, revolutionized farming by drastically improving efficiency and reducing human labor. Meanwhile, stricter regulations on harmful chemicals further diminished the need for hand harvesting. With these changes, the job faded into history, replaced by safer and more efficient methods that transformed the agricultural landscape. Now, let's journey back to the era of locomotives. During the 1940s and 50s, the job of a train fireman was crucial yet hazardous on steam locomotives. Train firemen were responsible for stoking coal into the engine's firebox, ensuring a steady fuel and water supply, and maintaining the proper fire intensity for various parts of the journey. They also managed the ash pan, a messy task involving the removal of ash and cinders. This role required much physical labor and exposed workers to risks like burns and respiratory problems from coal dust. Train firemen were often seen as apprentices working to become locomotive engineers. The position began to fade in the late 60s and 70s as diesel and electric engines gradually replaced steam locomotives. These modern engines required less manual labor and were more efficient, rendering the fireman's job obsolete. Today, while the title train fireman still exists on some railroads, it now refers to engineers in training rather than the traditional role of maintaining steam engines. Working as a foundry worker in the 1960s was tough and dangerous. These individuals created metal castings by preparing molds, operating furnaces, and handling the finishing work once the metal had solidified. They worked amidst intense heat and dealt with potentially harmful substances like formaldehyde and phenol, which could irritate their eyes and respiratory systems. This role was essential during the industrial boom, but by the 1980s, it began to decline.
The dusty, black atmosphered foundry should be an image whose time has passed, replaced by a modern, safety-conscious work environment.
Automation and advancements in safety measures gradually replaced many of these manual tasks, leading to a safer and more efficient manufacturing process. As technology evolved, the traditional foundry worker's role diminished, giving way to modern automated methods that reduced the risk and the need for such hazardous work. Now, let's shift our focus to one of the most dangerous roles within the oil industry. Back in the day, oil field roustabouts were the unsung heroes of the drilling industry, braving dangerous conditions to keep oil rigs operational. These laborers tackled grueling tasks, from handling heavy equipment to maintaining the rig's machinery, often enduring 12-hour shifts or more. Their job was physically demanding and fraught with risks, including severe injuries from machinery and unsafe materials. The role peaked during the oil boom as the industry expanded rapidly. However, as drilling technology advanced and safety regulations tightened, the need for such intense manual labor diminished. By the late 20th century, modern machinery and improved safety standards had largely replaced the roustabout's role. Today, while some roustabouts remain in the field, many have moved on to specialized positions or different careers. There was a time when shipyard welders toiled in the heart of bustling shipyards, crafting and repairing massive vessels with sheer skill and grit. These welders worked in the smoky haze of poorly ventilated spaces, their tasks essential to both new construction and ship repairs. They interpreted intricate blueprints and employed welding techniques, often amidst toxic fumes and explosive materials. This demanding job took a significant toll on their bodies, eye strain from the bright arcs of welding torches, knees, necks, and backs burdened by the constant physical exertion. The risk and working conditions were high, and no modern safety gear or regulations existed. As technology advanced, automation began to take over welding processes, reducing the reliance on manual labor. Improved safety standards and new welding methods gradually made this risky job obsolete. Back in the 1960s, the job of a textile mill worker was one of the most demanding and deadly occupations.
To and fro and to, cough for me, cough for you. Thank the looms of Lancashire for many £1,000,000 a year. Up and down, clitter crack, push it on, pull it back.
Textile mills were bustling factories where workers operated massive, complex weaving machines that transformed raw cotton into fabric. The work was grueling, with workers often laboring long hours in environments filled with noise, heat, and swirling cotton dust. This dust, a byproduct of the weaving process, led to a severe respiratory condition known as brown lung disease, in which workers' lungs became discolored and severely damaged. During its peak, textile mill work was a cornerstone of the industrial economy, especially in the American South. However, as the 1970s and 80s approached, automation began to reshape the industry. New technologies and machines reduced the need for manual labor, significantly improving working conditions and minimizing health risks. As a result, many of these dangerous manual roles faded, replaced by automated systems that made textile production safer and more efficient. Facing the ferocity of the open sea with minimal protection, deep-sea fishermen once braved some of the most extreme conditions imaginable. Without the advanced safety gear we rely on today, these pioneers wrestled with towering waves and relentless storms, risking their lives with each voyage. Their daily grind was fraught with danger, driven by the pressing need to deliver seafood to an eager market. As the decades rolled on and technology advanced, the industry transformed with new safety equipment and better weather forecasting, drastically reducing the risks. Today's deep-sea fishing is far safer, but the legend of those fearless mariners endures, highlighting a bygone era of unparalleled bravery and resilience. Next, we'll explore a risky job often entrusted to children. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the role of a breaker boy in coal mining was a dangerous job mostly undertaken by young boys.
You didn't dare cushion it nowhere. No matter what you had to sit on that plain plank with your feet in the chute and bend over like this.
These children, some as young as 8, worked in hazardous environments, sorting coal by hand. Positioned beside conveyor belts, they broke down large chunks of coal into smaller, uniform pieces while separating impurities like rocks and clay. The job exposed them to harmful dust and frequent accidents, making it a hazardous occupation. Breaker boys first appeared in the mid-1860s and were a common sight in coal mines across the U.S. Despite growing public concern about child labor by the 1880s, the practice persisted until the early 1920s. The decline of this job came with the advent of child labor laws and significant advancements in mining machinery, which made manual sorting obsolete.